Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Danielle. I'm a writer, I'm a reader, I'm a student. I usually talk about writing on here, but let's talk about books for a hot sec. Something fun about my review process is that I am very picky when it comes to my book. And I know I'm not the only one. I'm just letting you know. By the way, I'm going to be putting all of the books I'm reviewing here because I get pretty much 99% of my books from the library. So the first book that I'm reviewing is going to be Savvy Business Owner by Savy Leiser, fuck me. So I will let you know that I was given an ARC in exchange for an honest review. It's been a hot sec. Sorry that it's been so long. Better late than never. One thing I will say is that I genuinely did love the book. It provided amazing advice for people who wanted to start a business. And one thing that I really loved about it was that it was not a motivational book. Savvy said in the book, if you need to read a motivational book to encourage yourself to start a business, then you're not ready to start a business. I don't need someone to tell me that I can start a business. I know I can, and I want to in the future. So I really like that this book provided a lot of technical advice that wouldn't have been given to me before. So I'm going to be reading off some of the notes from my computer. So my favorite section was the Myths of Boss Babe Life, which was a chapter section thing. I really liked it because it gave me advice on how the personal side of starting a business. And it also talked about MLM being a scam. I believe that was the section that introduced me to a lot of terminology when it came to running a business, so I also very much appreciate that. My one and only gripe with the book was that I felt like it glorified hustle culture. Now hold up. I love Savvy so much. I was on her podcast. Thank you so much. I understand that having your own business is difficult and you're going to sacrifice a lot of your personal time. I also believe you can have a hobby outside of work, you know? And I believe that you should. I believe like there's tons of people that have sustainable businesses that they've started by themselves and are able to have great and fulfilling balanced lives. I think the great example that I would think of is Hannah Witten. Now, mind you, I do expect that to do more work in the beginning, but I don't think that it's normal to normalize working 24/7. Because that's just not healthy. You're gonna burn out. And this really stood out to me in the networking chapter because Savvy said that her only hobby was networking. I know that's not her only hobby. I know that's not. I know that she loves to play Nintendo and then she works out and she loves to read. But if you're gonna put that in a book, I love Savvy, and I've talked about this with her before. I said that I really value creative play, meaning that just doing something creative just for the hell of it. Literally saying that networking is your only hobby, kinda sus anyway. And this combined with her saying that she worked 100+ hours a week, I understand that people do that, but at the same time, I don't think that we should be normalizing it. The networking chapter wasn't 100% bad, obviously, but that was the biggest thing that made me feel, you know, overall, I love the book to death and I would recommend it to anyone who is a writer or let alone just wants to start their own business. Savvy has a lot of great advice. And also in the book, she offers her email and actively encourages her readers to email her if they have questions, which by the way, an actual saint. I'm in a position where I feel like I could just message her and ask her a question if I needed to, but yeah, I'm sure that she would be willing to help you. Go read the book, go support Savvy. I love her so much. Thank you for the ARC. 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I'm going to talk about is A Darker Shade of Magic by B.E. Schwab. Okay, fine. I read it. Finally. Everyone telling me to read it for years, I finally did. And you know what? You were right. It was amazing. So Quill is an Untari, meaning that he can travel between different types of London. He's also a smuggler, which is very illegal. And then at some point during his travels, he comes into possession of something that he should be smuggling that is very bad. He's gotten himself into some deep shit. He goes to Grey London, which is the non-magical London, and runs into Delilah Bard, and then someone is hunting down Kel and Delilah. They have to pretty much return or get rid of or destroy this weird object that Kel has somehow smuggled before it falls into the wrong hands, lest people die. The thing about this book, I don't think it was ever meant to be like a classic literature or something like that. It's good for what it is. It's a fun fantasy book that's a great ride. Oh my goodness. And Kel has a heart of gold. I mean, I get it why people simp for him. I 1000% would if the comp head took over my life again. That one scene where everyone broke into that pawn shop and then Kel had to pretend that he was like all suave and arrogant, and he was like, what are you doing here? I'm just here doing some business. Ugh. Characters that think on their feet, that are cunning, arrogant, and confident enough to get away with that shit, I get it why people simp for him. I 1000% would too. The one and only complaint that I had with the book was that it took quite some time to get to the inciting incident. The book was about 400-ish pages, and it took like almost nearly 100 pages to get to the inciting incident. And the inciting incident should not take 25% of the way to get into a book, let alone 100 pages. If you're reading 1 page a minute, you're asking them to sit with your book for 2 hours. For a little under 2 hours. Like, I was so close to DNFing this book. There had to be a better way to weave in the world building as opposed to just dumping it all on in the middle for the first 100 pages. Why did it take 100 pages to get to the inciting incident? Because it gets to the inciting incident and everything goes so fast, which is fantastic. I love fast-paced fantasy action books. They're a hell of a lot of fun. But why did it take 100 pages to get there? There had to be a better way to world build that in. Sure, it was a slow start, and yes, I do believe it was worth it, but at the same time, I don't believe that you should be asking potential readers that don't trust you yet. It's the first book of a series to give you 100 pages of time to get to the inciting incident. Still bitter. I haven't read the second book yet, and frankly, I don't know if I will, because I am still bitter about taking 100 pages. Maybe, I'm sure I'll read another V.E. Schwab book again, but I have other things to read. A Darker Shade of Magic, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, although right now I think it would be around like 3-ish stars instead. So the next book I read was Soft Science by Franny Choi. It was a poetry book about Choi's experience with being a queer Asian woman. Those poems are very sci-fi-esque, a lot of cyborg stuff going on. There are a few poems about a cyborg trying to pass the Turing test, which, by the way, fantastic concept for a poem, right? I thought that it was about like the struggles of remaining kind in a harsh, automated world. Here's the thing. I'm at a point where I feel like I'm getting smart enough for poetry, but I'm not smart enough for this type of poetry. Poetry is so subjective at this point. Like, who am I to say that a poem is good or bad? I 100% believe that this collection was fantastic. I just don't think that I'm smart enough to analyze every poem in this. I just don't think I had the reading comprehension to poetry in this style for me to really appreciate it. So did I hate it? No. Did I love it? No, because I don't know how to love it, nor do I know how to hate it. Here's the thing. Maybe I'm just stupid. Right? I'm sure that if you love literary fiction, specifically literary fiction like literary poetry, this would be great. I love literary fiction and literary poetry. This level was just kind of... You could have been giving me a lecture on rocket science, and then I would have gotten the same thing when I read this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because I don't know. If you're gonna bully me about the lighting changing, I don't want to hear it. The next book I read was The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman and Alexie. So everyone had to read this book for school, except me, because Eurocentric education system. Woo! Anyway, if you haven't read this book, it's a story heavily based on the author's life. He's a Native American kid growing up on a reservation that leaves the reservation to seek out a better education, and I believe he's in middle school at the time. So I've read very few books about indigenous experiences, specifically Native American indigenous experiences, right? I just like it when books about a particular culture only showcase the good parts of it. If I'm gonna read a book about the Philippines, I would expect some commentary on like something Filipino related. We're not just gonna be like, yay, family and food, yeah, yay. I did like that this book was able to tackle heavy topics like gambling and alcoholism, violence, and at like a kid-friendly level. And here's the thing, long story short, it's a great fucking story. The whole identity crisis of like being called an apple was just relatable, a little bit too much for me, because it explains racism in not just a way for kids, but in a way that kids experience it. A kid is young enough to experience racism, then a white kid is young enough to learn about it. I give that one 5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I know that I've always loved fantasy, but I could never get into it anymore. And here's the thing, I think I grew out of YA fantasy a long time ago and just didn't know it. Fuck my pronunciation of these names. Story is about Eid, who's an outsider. She's put into court to protect the queen, a queen that would kill her if she knew who Eid really was. Queen Sabran must have a child to protect her queendom. Tanny is training to ride dragons, but she's got some moral conflicts to settle with. All of these stories coincide once a huge Ganon-like dragon is threatening to explode out of the volcano. Okay, first things first, we love being heterobated in this household. I did not know that this book was sapphic. When we were reading the piece from the lesbian's point of view, I did not recognize it. I was like, oh, same. I'm an embarrassment. So in this story, there's pirates, mermaids, royalty, swords with long lances, and lesbians, dragons, complex religions, magic. What is not to love about this book? The world building was so detailed and real. Ede was a fantastic main character. He's very charming. I have a lot of feelings. The sea dragons. This book is a fantastic transition from people who are comfortable in YA fantasy and are starting to transition into reading adult fantasy. Is there sexy scenes? There was a sexy scene, but it wasn't a smutty sexy scene. It was a sexy scene told from the female gaze. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking. Read this book. And so we're gonna have a bonus section in the book reviews, and today we are going to be talking about the Magnus Archives podcast by the Rusty Quill. Chima has been recommending this podcast for ages, and I was like, whatever. I'm not that big of a podcast person. I'm probably not gonna like. So this story goes as follows. Jonathan Simmons has taken up the position of head archivist at the Magnus Institute in London. So people come to the institute to give their statements with supernatural experiences, right? And so it's just a bunch of short horror stories, and there's just like an ongoing theme, and they all connect to, you know, a bigger story in the end. And Jonathan, the way that people are simping for Martin is the way I'm simping for Jonathan. How can you simp for Martin? I just fucking know Jonathan is a dill. I like horror in theory, but I've never had a lot of good luck with watching horror movies. And I think the reason why is because, one, I don't get scared that often. Like, I could watch someone get fucking murdered and I'll just be like, I think the way that podcasts get to me, this podcast specifically, is that the sound design is just disgusting in a good way. And the way that it's described, like having to listen to a horror story as opposed to watching it on the screen. When I'm watching on the screen, I can see everything. But when I'm listening to it, my own imagination is going to make something as scary as it can be to scare me. Scenes on the screen just don't do it for me, but scenes in my head. So I think the form of a podcast for the story works fantastic because of the audio and also the body horror. The audio and the body horror at the same time. I don't get grossed out. I haven't been grossed out while reading this. I've never gagged. This is the closest I've gotten to it. I pitched this podcast as like modern day Lovecraftian, but without the racism and ableism. And like I said, everyone's sipping for Martin, but y'all are missing out on Jonathan. But second, I found out that people are shipping Jonathan and Martin, which, maybe it's just because I always imagine Martin as like this intern who just left college and Jonathan as like this grumpy 65-year-old. So everyone who ships Jonathan and Martin together, just say that you like enemies to lovers and that you're like scared of being too evil and that no one will ever love you. Just fucking say it with your chest, will you? I love enemies to lovers too, but Jonathan and Martin, a chemistry? None. But then again, I've only watched season 1 and I believe that I'm halfway through season 2. No spoilers. I swear, if there is a spoiler in the comment section, I will personally find you and I can't find the thread. I'll send one of the Magnus Archive forbidden beings after you. I would recommend this book for anyone who doesn't feel satisfied with horror, specifically because they don't get scared. Thank you for coming to my book reviews. I believe that I'm going to be posting another thing of book reviews in a few weeks, so look forward to that. Thank you again so much for watching. My name's Danielle, and all of my links will be in the description. Please subscribe. I'm trying to post videos every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I've started a collab channel with a few friends. You can also find it down there, and I post on there every Wednesday. So if you want to see videos that are not writing or book related, find me on there. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, bye.